Okay, we've got Nicole and Gemma from the University Library joining us to give us a bit of an update on open research. Thanks for coming along and thanks for visiting in person.
Oh, thanks for having us. Thanks for inviting us. So for those that I haven't met, I think that's most of you. Yes, I'm Nicole, the Research Liaison Librarian for School of Nursing. And Gemma is our Research Data and Open Science Librarian. So I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands within our footprint area. So the Gadigal, Darkinjung, Wurundjeri, Wonnarua and the Eora Nations. And I pay my respect to the wisdom of the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that acknowledgement to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders here today. So today, Gemma and I thought we'd just go over some of the key changes in open access policies for you. So we've got our university open access policy that I'll go through, highlight any changes that have come in around open access for NHMRC and MRF, and how you can go open access publications through the university. Open research data and a bit on data management planning as well. So for anybody who's new to the world of open access, we've just included a couple here on what it is. So basically, open access is a term applied to research outputs that have been made freely available online. They are journals, conferences, books, and chapters. And most commonly, you'll find that something that's open access also carries what we call a Creative Commons license, which also, when you share your work online, also allows, by signing one of those licenses, you're allowed a further sharing and reuse of that output, ensuring you're acknowledged for your work. Some of the benefits here around publishing open access, you're increasing the visibility, you'll get greater, can often lead to greater impact on citation rates, influence policy, equitable access, and you will comply with institutional and fund policies. Do feel free to ask questions as we go, that's okay, and for those joining us online, feel free to kind of unmute or just pop something in the chat. We'll monitor that as well as we go. So the first one is our university open access policy. So what this one requires, and the key principles that we've got listed here on the screen are around the metadata that describes the research output and the full version of the research output where it is possible should be submitted to our institutional repository, which is Open Research Newcastle. Any peer-reviewed journals, conferences, any HDR theses must be made open upon publication. And where possible, books or NTROs should be made open where you can. Data that is directly related to any of the published output should also be made open at the time of publication as well. So we'll go through a few ways of how you can actually do that as we move through. So this year the NHMRC and MRFF updated their policy as well. So some of the key things are here on the slide, but one of the major kind of things that they've included here is they've moved to basically changed the name from an open access policy to open science policy, which does broaden their focus and opens it up to that entire research. It's not just about making the publication open. So these type of things that we're now talking about include registering and publishing of protocols, the development of methodologies. They've opened it up now to preprints, making your data open peer review, scientific volunteering. But the inclusion of preprints is just something we thought we'd highlight because if you do make something open via a preprint, there's probably a few things that you should kind of consider as you do that. So they kind of involve, you can add them to preprint repositories, but they are not something that we can deposit into Open Research Newcastle, which is our institutional repository. You'd also need to consider, if you're going to publish it in a journal, that some journals have a preprint policy as well. So that kind of inclusion comes with a few things to think about if you go down that route. The NHMRC don't have a preference to an OA route to make your work open. They do discourage, something that's not new is they do discourage hybrid journals, but if they're part of one of our read and publish agreements, that's actually okay. Avoid putting your work up on things like ResearchGate and Academia, EDUAU, because they're not part of their repository alignment. If you're doing books, chapters or edited things, they're encouragement to make them open as well. They do encourage now the data management plans, open software and code, and sharing of clinical trials. To share your research data and any metadata associated is to make it as open as you can, but closed if it's necessary. And they have included additional directions for register. It's mandated to register a clinical trial and that they should be reported on within 12 months. And they do actually now encourage the sharing of negative or null results with reasoning behind. That can sometimes be around, they can train the LLMs on research papers because research papers won't see the data if it's not open. So they do encourage sharing if you have negative results. They also do monitor compliance, and that happens at our institutional level to make sure we're complying with their policies. So we've linked on the bottom here their policy, and the ARDC did run a webinar on major changes to the policy. That's quite good, that we've linked here for you too. They have also released generative AI in grant applications, which is going to highlight that for you here as well. So it's kind of around, assuming anything you render is going in the public domain. That human review is mandated. Critical assessment for bias. But we have linked their joint statement here around that. So it's only to be used as where appropriate and to be a support tool when you're in the preparation process. So when it comes to publishing, this is just a quick table to differentiate the two policies. So we've got the NHMRC and the universities one. So just a few differences there around that the preprints are okay for NHMRC, but not under the university policy. We've got, but some of them are the same. So CC BY license, which is your Creative Commons license, is not mandated at the university level, but is for NHMRC. And the rest there is very similar, and the metadata records.
This license, CC BY, that license is the usually we choose it, or CC BY license? The license for the open access?
It's one of the, it is one of the Creative Commons license, so it is one of the more, it's the least open, least restrictive, most open one. So basically it is just that if you're CC BY, your work will be, and someone uses your work, they just have to attribute to and say that they've used it. It's
Yeah, when you publish, the journal will usually give you a choice.
Choice of three.
Sometimes,
Yeah,
yeah.
some two,
yeah.
some three.
But
I usually go with the middle one.
the middle one, yeah. It's just, NHMRC is saying they prefer the CC BY license now, but the university doesn't specify which one. So, so technically to comply with the NHMRC, they want you to select that CC BY license. But I suppose that's where the preprint option comes in, because if you publish your version of record under under a more restrictive CC license, or even behind a paywall, if you plan ahead, you can make that preprint open with a CC BY license, and then you would be in compliance with NHMRC. So I suppose that's an option too. And then you just have to make sure you still comply with the university policy as well. And that might be through putting your author accepted manuscript in the repository. And the license would be your choice.
Yes, if you put the author accepted manuscript final version in the university's repository, does that cover the NHMRC's requirement?
It does, as long as it's got the CC BY license though.
Oh, I see.
So for NHMRC, one of the versions that you make open has to have the CC BY license.
And is there a way to fix this later, or does it only apply sort of going forward now? Or?
They've started from, was it the start of the year? So it's only implementable from the start of the year. So anything you've done before is kind of out of scope for the changes. They had an old policy that you would have had to comply with for those qualifications, but you don't need to go and backdate and change anything. Yeah.
So this is a university repository, can you refer to that, or is that a reference there?
Yes, we'll have links in slides, you mean? Yeah, and we'll talk about it a bit more as we go on.
With the institutional repository, the blue box there,
Yes.
subject to publisher policy,
Yes.
is there like a general resource for like the major publishers?
There is, yes, there's a link. We'll pop it in the slide before we share it. But there is a tool, it's like an open access finder policy, and you just type in the journal and it tells you what they allow with each version of the record. But and we're always happy to answer questions on that as well. But yeah, often the big publishers do put rules around the license that can be applied to the author accepted manuscript, so they might not allow the CC BY license. There is a way to negotiate that with them that we'll talk about, but it is one kind of barrier to open access through the repository group. Yeah.
So that one, you will notice it's been on the screen. It doesn't include preprints. The route for preprint application, and that is mainly because the university's policy doesn't allow that. But this one is just how you could go the other ways to make your work open. So the top one there is paying the APC and making the gold open access, which is immediate open access for a publisher. The middle one is the hybrid, and the bottom one is subscription, which you can then, as we've just discussed, place a author accepted manuscript into the repository if it's allowed by the publisher, which then does what we call green open access. Some publishers do have, and that's where Jem said that open finder tool. Some may have an embargo on when the manuscript can be shared. We'll pop that in as well. So with us, we have the ways to make your work open access. We have the read and publish agreements, which some of you may know about. And they are, there's 15 publishers with access to over around 11,000 journals. So to publish with them, we do have the link here on the page, and it will have a Excel spreadsheet that you can download that tells you all of the journals that are available. For these, you don't need to pay the APC. Some publications may charge an extra admin fee or coloured pages or things like that. Sometimes that's but they'll tell you that as you go through it. To publish with them, the corresponding author needs to be affiliated with the university and use their uni email and make sure that the University of Newcastle is in the byline. And each of them do have eligible publication types, but standard research articles are often on with them. So they're all, some of the publishers that we've got this year are Cambridge, Elsevier, Emerald, Oxford, Springer, Wiley and Taylor and Francis. Wiley is, everything's uncapped, so there is no limit on submission except for Wiley. Their gold open access journals have a cap, but currently it's not projected to meet that until mid-November. So everything's looking pretty good so far. The other one we have is the APC fund. It's been a couple of changes to it this year. It's intended for early and mid-career researchers, but there is exceptions around career level, which is made by the Associate Dean of Research at the college. So they cover the cost of open access publishing. If you're any HDR students, they do need permission from their supervisor to use the fund. It's just when you submit their application, we just ask that they put in an email correspondence to say it's authorised. All current staff, conjoint and honorary, who are A to D, can apply. The applicant needs to be the first or the lead on the manuscript. But if you're not the first, we just ask that there is evidence to support that you were the lead. I think for health, it's usually standard, the lead, but some other ones, they like to do alphabetical listing, and we just need to know that the person applying is the lead. It's one application per year, and it opened in January. It needs to be original research. There needs to be a Q1 journal in both of the journal ranking schemes, which is the Journal Citation Reports and the Chicago Journal Ranking website. Now the college allocation for the whole fund, there has been a top up at the moment. So we're actually in the process of splitting the funds between all the college, but that top up for the health and wellbeing is actually expected for to cover most of the year, but depending on how much things cost, we can't actually guarantee that, because as you know, some are pretty expensive in this area. Gemma's just going to do the last little bit around the repository and some data stuff for you.
Are there any questions before we keep going, maybe about the funding schemes or anything else like that, the new policies? We'll keep going.
Does APC usually runs over the year, or it will finish earlier?
Yeah, it's hard to predict. We seem to get like flurries. We'll have a few quiet weeks and then we'll get heaps of applications and a big portion will get chewed up. So yeah, last year we did have a lot of applications towards the end of the year when the funds were running out. So that, I think there's a bit of demand towards the back end. But unfortunately it's really hard to pick because, if you're submitting to a journal like 6 months ahead of acceptance, we have no way to project what will happen. So I think if it's starting to look like funds and are going to run out or caps are going to get reached, if you are relying on the APC to pay the funds, to pay the fee, it might be worth considering a hybrid journal, because in the worst case, if we get to the end of the year and there's no money for APCs, you can still publish the paywall subscription route and then make the work open through the repository. So that's a free option.
Sorry, excuse me, because I'm very new to publishing. There was a comment, point on the previous slide that said we've heard for the journal impact factor, but also the SRJ.
Yes,
What does
that's
that
right.
mean? The
Yeah.
SRJ quartile one?
Yes, that's right. So there's two kind of major systems that rank journals. And they divide them into journals into subject categories, and then within the subject category, the top 25% of the Q1. So the journals.
Journal, yeah, if I just.
The SJR, it's a free website online, so you don't need to have a subscription to that. You can look up any journal. It's just that the differences, the main difference is that SJR is based on Scopus data
Okay.
and the GIF is based on Web of Science data. So what that really means, actually, the journal needs to be indexed in Scopus and Web of Science. Otherwise, it won't be included in those rankings. So, yeah, it's just worth check before you submit, because the colleges have been very strict about the criteria this year. They're not accepting applications that fall outside the criteria.
Where does the call agreement fit with all of this?
Yeah, that's the one before the read and publish. So that's the call agreements.
Oh, that's the call.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
cool.
because that's what I always look at. I just use that one. But
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
It's it's sort of a safer bet, because there's no criteria around journal quartiles.
Yeah.
There's no limits on like one per person or anything like that. It is a bit of an easier
But I
route.
did notice it changes from year to year, because
It does.
was planning on going that way and then it changed
Yes.
after it got accepted. And I was like, no.
Yeah,
It
it's
was a headache, and I actually had to change my affiliation to a different university.
to get there.
to get there.
That's good you had that
Like,
option.
Yeah.
It's we hate when people get stuck with APCs. And the main changes are, if last year a lot more of the agreements were a lot more capped. So Springer and Elsevier and Wiley, well, Elsevier didn't hit the cap, but they all had caps, and Springer particularly and Wiley hit their caps quite early in the year, so
Right.
people were stuck.
Yeah.
Whereas this year they've been negotiated without caps, except for the Wiley open access only journals. So they're kind of a bit less messy this year. And that was a response to all the problems that we had last year. Are there any more questions? So just, again, with if you are interested in open access via the repository, we've just broken up the different versions of your manuscript, the different rules around those. So as Steve mentioned, preprints, well, that's now a route for NHMRC compliance. It's not a route for the university's open access policy compliance, because we require that peer-reviewed version to be made open access. So that can't be deposited to the repository, but the author accepted manuscript and the version of record both can be deposited. With the author accepted manuscript, usually that would be, you'd be depositing that because the version of record is behind a paywall. And so it's just like the plain text version of your peer reviewed output. And the publisher will have some rules around how you can share that. So they usually require a 12-month embargo or longer. And they'll usually dictate which CC license you can apply to that copy. So we have to look at a few things before we can put that in the repository. Now, our Neuro system, which you use for your research profiles at the university, that now has extra functionality to allow the deposit into the repository via that system. So you can do it a lot more independently. There's still support available from the library, but you do have that ability now to just upload the file to Neuro and then push it through to the repository. So that it's a quicker way to get things open access.
Does Neuro provide like an indicator whether you can do it?
It has not so much that when you go into the deposit system, there is a widget, like a little tool, and it connects to that open policy finder that we mentioned earlier. So you can look up a journal and it will give you a summary of their policy and a link to their policy. So you can look up the resource that way. Of course, there's always, I suppose, edge cases, and with any tool there can be errors in the information that it's providing. But usually, you can look up that information pretty easily, and we can help if it's hard to interpret. Because often they have a lot of different rules around different versions. It can be quite confusing.
I must say, like, I usually only put it up if I know it's open access and it's
Yeah,
gold and I'm like, easy done. Put it
Exactly.
up. Otherwise I just go too hard and don't do it.
There are some
I
barriers.
start reading the stuff and I'm like.
I just get so confused and I'm like,
Well, I mean, that's sort of, we're here to help. The publishers, they're not making it easy because they don't want you to, I mean, not that they don't want you to, but
Seems like once you get through this, that you've got a surrogate paralegal qualification.
it does get a bit technical, but obviously they want you to pay the ABCs, don't they? So they're not going to make it easy for anyone. We're just, I guess, muddling through until there's a better system, hopefully one day. And then with the version of record, of course, that's the nice PDF that appears on the publisher's website. And that can only be put in the repository if the publication was open access. So usually that means you went through the read and publish agreement or you paid the APC from your funds. That's the only time we can put that up in the repository, because then it will have that Creative Commons license. Otherwise, the publisher owns the copyright and the license to distribute that version of the article. So they're the options. Okay, we'll keep going. And as I've mentioned, often the publisher's policies don't allow you to comply with their funder mandates. So because the NHMRC asks for that immediate open access with the CC BY license, often that conflicts with the publisher's policies around what you can do with your author-accepted manuscript. So the NHMRC encourage you to use an author rights retention statement. They've provided one for people that don't have access to an institutional one, but we actually have one in our open access policy that you can use. So if you provide this to the publisher, it's a bit controversial because people feel like it puts them on the back foot with being accepted. So there's a couple of options. You might submit it in a cover letter, like a cover letter that goes with your submission, and that's asserting the rights to your author accepted manuscript, the right to share it with a CC BY license immediately. Or you can try and negotiate with them after acceptance by, if you're publishing subscription, you'll be signing a copyright transfer license. So as part of that process, you would try and have this statement applied to the contract that you're signing with them. So it does, it's just trying to give authors more rights over their manuscripts. And it shouldn't affect your acceptance, especially like if you wait till after, it definitely won't. But they can say no, and there's kind of some open questions about if they say no, the institution has got the policy, so does that override the publisher's policies? And it's a bit of it's an emerging field at the moment. But the funders are really pushing these, so I think it will become a lot clearer, like the power behind them soon. All right, so that's the end of the publishing content. We're just going to move on to a couple of slides about research data and data management planning, especially because the NHMRC's policy has now expanded more into open science, so not just focusing on publication. So at a very minimum for NHMRC, you're required to include a data availability statement in your research paper. So if you had made your data open access, that statement would include a link to the data on the open web so that anyone can go and access and use that data for themselves. And researchers are expected, as we've mentioned, to take reasonable steps to share the data and associated metadata as openly as possible and as closed as necessary. So the as closed as necessary, that usually refers to sensitive data or data that is about or impacts Indigenous peoples. And there are other cases as well. And open access mandates for data never override the importance of protecting sensitive data and Indigenous data. So there's always exceptions. There. In our open access policy, we do ask that data is made available at the time of the research output publication, and that again doesn't supersede the sensitive data and the Indigenous data requirements. And journals are increasingly requiring open data, or at the very least, they're requiring a data availability statement. So it is something that's growing. We have policies and systems that can help you make data open, or at least publish a metadata record, which can, it's sort of one step on the road to making the data open. At least if there's a metadata record about the data, even if the files aren't included, people know it exists and they can contact you to get access to the data if that's an option. So we've mentioned some data can't be shared, and that's okay. And some data can be made freely open. So open data doesn't have to mean like the files are just available for download. There are a few options if you want to kind of protect it a little bit or protect who uses the data. There's 3 different levels. So with restricted data, that would be data that just can't be made publicly available, maybe for cultural or commercial reasons, legal reasons. So access may be granted to approved individuals under strict data sharing agreements. That would be like a process of setting up that sharing relationship with someone who wanted, usually you'd be giving access to approved researchers and they'd have to go through a big application and prove what they were going to use the data for. And in some cases, a member of the original data creation team would be required to be on their project, so they use the data in the correct way. So that's one option. Mediated is a bit less restrictive. The data is not freely available, but you may publish like a contact that people can just email, and then that they would just send the data to people who request access to the data. With the mediated access, an option would be to publish a data record on our institutional repository, and it would have the information about the data, like the creators and what the project was about, and just with a contact person, so that at least the record's out there, and then any interested parties can inquire with them. And then open access is the most open form of the data. You publish a record to a data repository, and it's just downloadable for everyone. It would often be shared with a CC BY or a CC 0 license. And this is only suitable for de-identified, non-sensitive data sets.
So can I ask, I've never shared data anywhere.
That's very common.
Except perhaps with a data sharing agreement with a collaborator. Is the sort of data we collect in observational studies and clinical trials generally considered confidential, even if it was de-identified? Or would it come under that open access where we should be putting it somewhere?
No.
I think it is sensitive.
It's sensitive
Health
because it's
data is
medical
sensitive,
information.
yeah.
Right.
And also it would be in your ethics that you can't
Right.
share.
So generally we're not sharing data.
No, there's legal agreements
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't think so.
yeah, it depends on the project.
Yeah, what's an
Like,
example of where?
Just gone through.
For like
From this.
omics studies, so like transcriptomics, most journals have a requirement or a stipulation that you upload just the omics, the raw omics data to the Gene Omnibus or something like that, so other people can access it. But then the clinical metadata doesn't get shared, so then you still have to contact the authors to get access to that. So
Yeah. So what's the point of having it without, like, can people use omics data?
they can use, so you can use it for some things without requiring the patient metadata, but you can also sort of do some initial things and then maybe establish a collaboration or whatever for data sharing. Yeah.
So if you are going down the data sharing route, there's a few options. So you'll be looking for a data repository. It's a specific space for researchers to deposit data publicly, or just data records. It doesn't have to be the data set. It's different from cloud storage or publishing data as a supplemental file with an article. There's a range of different repositories. We've got our institutional repository that accepts data publications. We've got discipline-specific repositories, and yeah, that includes the genomic repositories that I believe you were mentioning. There's also general-purpose repositories like Dryad, Zenodo, and Open Science Framework. Some of these do have fees as well, so it's just, you have to investigate the best option for your data. The benefit of repositories are, of course, increased impact, increased collaboration opportunities, reduce research duplication, greater transparency of your research processes, and the repositories offer long-term preservation. So that's different to a journal website. If the journal goes defunct, any supplementary files that you publish will be lost forever. So it's about that preservation functionality as well.
Yeah, but in the HMRC case, all the data needs to be destroyed after 15 years. That's clinical trial data. Other data is within 7 years.
Yeah, so that's the minimum period of retention.
Yeah.
So if you put it in a repository, unless they have a disposal procedure or policy, it may not be deleted at that time. Yeah, so
And we are not doing it.
those time periods, they're largely about minimum retention periods. This is an example of a data record in our institutional repository. This is from Tracy Burrows' team, the nutrition group. Yep. So in this case, they have made files available for download. So there's a download button for the files. One benefit of the repository is that it provides usage metrics. So downloads and clicks, things that you can use to show the impact and use of the data. You can link to all your publications, so it kind of keeps everything nicely bundled together. You can apply a license of your choosing. And we can also, this one, it's got a handle address up the top, but it actually does have a DOI. So part of the process of depositing the data in our repository is you can request a DOI. And that's great because it's then a citable, easily trackable link that you can use to follow the use of the data. And then finally, just a slide on research data management planning. So any data sharing, it can't just happen at the end. You have to be thinking about it from the beginning because, as we mentioned, it needs to be accounted for in ethics approvals. Participant consent forms would need to allow for data sharing, and it will affect the way you present the data because if you're going to present data for public use, it's going to affect which supplementary files you create around it, like README files and the labels you give to columns and headings. It needs to be useful outside of the project team. So all those things require careful planning. But in general, even if you're not sharing data, a research data management plan is still required, and it's also just a great idea in general. the university does have a policy requiring research data management plans, and the NHMRC, strongly encourages that researchers have a data management plan. It's a living document that outlines how the data will be treated at all parts of the research project, and it can be updated as the project goes along as well. So it just reduces the risk of data loss. It encourages a consistent approach, like you can use it as a way to communicate with the project team about file naming conventions and organisation, storage locations, things like that. If someone leaves who was kind of in charge of the data or kept it on their system, that's not a great scenario, and having a data management plan, it controls for all those cases, because you'll nominate a data custodian, a secondary custodian, you'll be putting in place processes where the data is in a central file. So it's not, there's not one single point of failure. And as mentioned, it then enables data sharing down the track, because you've already put those plans in place from the beginning. This is a screenshot of our data management dashboard. So this is just a system to ease the burden of creating a DMP. It's there's a template provided, and you just fill it in for the project. You can then print it to PDF and provide it as part of an ethics application. DTS at the university also requires you to attach a plan if you need to apply for extra research data storage. So it's just required there. As you go along, so there's 3 modules in the dashboard. The first one's around creating that plan at the start of the project. But at the end of the project, if you're doing the data sharing, it's also the place where you can arrange that. So that's where you can order the DOI for the data set, and then upload the files that you want to share to the institutional repository. And it's really just a click of a button. It goes into a review queue, we'll review it, and then we'll publish it to the repository with all the information that you've provided. And then I'll go. Just a slide on all the things the library can support you with. So there's APC funding schemes, our repository services, including data management, planning and publishing. We can help with the rights retention process, the open access policies, understanding compliance with those. We have a copyright specialist in the library, so we can help with those tricky licensing questions. And then we've got our researcher profile support. So funders are increasingly requiring that applicants have ORCIDs. So if anyone doesn't have one, that's easy to apply through Euro for an ORCID. And just general open science support and open publishing support. Okay, thanks very much. Are there any more questions before we finish up?
If we weren't fully in keeping with the university's open access policy, what are the implications?
Good question. I guess you're
Asking for a friend.
I guess you're just not in compliance with the policy. Yeah. But I suppose it's really the funders, they are increasingly requiring open access, and I don't know, they're a bit they're not always very clear about how they're enforcing policies, but in the latest updates they are starting to mention that they'll be doing institutional level compliance. So I suppose then does that flow down from the institution? Yeah, it's a bit of this, yeah. But I think at the moment they're sort of indicating that it's not like punitive monitoring, it's more how's this policy going, we've got a new policy, are the rates increasing, like are there barriers to compliance? So yeah, I probably wouldn't be too scared, but you do have to report open access in your report backs for funding. So you will have to record whether you're in compliance or not, and they are strongly pushing for compliance, especially most things are strongly recommended, but the publication being open is more mandatory for NHLC. Yeah, I hope that answers the questions. We're not walking around with a big stick. But yeah, it is, I guess it's just that we're aligned with, or mostly aligned with the funder policies, so yeah, ideally they will become part of normal practice, and there are lots of benefits to open, but we also understand that, APCs are problematic, publishers are problematic, so yeah, I think there's always there's a bit of grey.
Thank you, that was really good.
I'll stop the share. Were there any questions?
No.
I have another question.
No.
So there's like a couple of journals in particular that like lots of papers of interest come up in that we don't have access through
Yeah.
the university.
Yeah.
How can you kind of help with that?
Yeah, you can definitely submit a request, like for one-off articles, we've got our institutional loan sharing system. So it's quite, if you look up the articles in our catalogues, there's almost like a button you can press to show results from other sources, and then it links and pre-fills a request form. So you'll just be emailed the PDF.
Okay.
Like usually the next day or within a couple of days, yeah, it's library loans. But if it's something, if it's not a one-off, and you want to nominate a particular journal for subscription, if you contact your research liaison librarian, then we can put that forward to the collections team. Yeah, so there's opportunities to subscribe to other journals, but it's usually like a yearly thing, so it might not happen straight away. And interlibrary loans will be the best in the meantime.
Generally think like.
That's the recipe medicine and Blue Journal for me.
Yeah.
I often find like there's a lot of really good articles there that can't access. Although like I've had like Nathan's ATS password at various points, but then that stops working.
I usually get it through one of my other places, so you can ask me to.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, if people have other
I can be your interlibrary person.
Yeah, there was at one point there was like a researcher came to visit Paul Foster ages ago from Harvard or something, and the whole wing was just using this guy's Harvard login. To get all
I
these-
actually find my best one is my Carolyn School one. I can usually get everything I need. That I can get that.
Yeah.
Those two.
The hospital line, we should help you as well.
Yeah.
They should, I'm sure they have contracts.
Yeah.
That's to be.
Yeah, there's very little we can get through interlibrary loans, but the delay, it's frustrating, you have to wait, if you just want to read something, you're waiting a day or so. So yeah, definitely send me through, that you're interested in.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought you probably should, but in case you didn't.
Yeah.